The Michael Berry Show.
State of Texas, according to the census, has 1.4 million veterans. Recent studies suggest between 33 and 44 veterans commit suicide every day in the United States. Representative Cody Harris said, Ibogaine isn't just another drug, it's a whisper of redemption. In a single dose, it can silence the screams of withdrawal, quiet the cravings that chain people to addiction, and mend the broken pieces of a mind ravaged by trauma. It has been described by Dakota Meyer as a hard reset. I don't know if it works. I don't know how it works. But I do know that I am very open and eager for us to try things that might help people who we send off to war, and others, by the way, who are suffering. To that end, Brian Hubbard is our guest. Welcome to the program, Brian.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to spend time with you and your audience this morning, sir.
What is your involvement with Ibogaine? Let's start there.
Well, I am a former appointed leader in Kentucky state government. I had the opportunity to run the state's Social Security, Disability, and Child Support Enforcement Systems, as well as a law enforcement agency called the Office of Medicaid Fraud and Abuse Control that investigates and prosecutes medical providers for fraud on that system. The last role I held in Kentucky state government was as the first chairman and executive director of the Kentucky Opioid Commission, which had as its responsibility the administration and oversight of almost $1 billion in settlement funds with which to combat an opioid epidemic that began in the Appalachian Mountains of East Kentucky, southern West Virginia, and the part of Virginia that I grew up in the far southwestern corner of that state. Within the role of chairman of the Opioid Commission, I said our very first responsibility is to look for Kentucky's Manhattan Project opportunity to pioneer a therapeutic breakthrough for opioid-dependent individuals. Despite best intentions and the deployment of billions of dollars in public money, our existing treatment options are delivering unacceptably mediocre results, and we must do better. So from that position, I started looking everywhere I could for what that opportunity may be. And on July the 29th of 2022, I heard the word Ibogaine for the very first time. And after 8 months of intensive due diligence research and critical examination that consisted of a second full-time off-the-books job performed over those months, I came to the conclusion that Ibogaine had three powerful attributes. One is that it essentially resolves physiological substance dependence for opioids, for alcohol, for cocaine, and for meth, a substance for which there are no effective medical treatments to deal with the individual in an accelerated time frame. And by that I mean within 36 to 48 hours of an initial administration for 80% of people who get it.
Brian, hold with me for just a moment. I had him pictured as Colonel Sanders. He looks more like Jeremiah Johnson. Robert Redford is Jeremiah Johnson. Big old hulked up dude. A lot younger than I expected. There are lots of promises of a silver bullet, but there are also things that work. And I really, for the people who would benefit from this, I really hope it does. Brian Hubbard is our guest. He's executive director of the American Ibogaine Initiative through the REID Foundation. Brian, I had you pictured looking like Colonel Sanders, and then you came off looking like Jeremiah Johnson.
Well, I always enjoy the opportunity to deliver unexpected surprises.
And how'd you get so hulked up? What's your background?
Well, by way of background, I grew up in the coal fields of Virginia. I grew up in a working class family. I had two beautiful papaws who were grade school educated coal miners underground for 40 years, and they were the guiding lights of my life. Like many folks who are under the age 50 and younger, I had parents who essentially had a relationship that I recall as one of a significant amount of conflict and chaos and screaming and hollering. And as a frightened young little boy, my papas would pull me to the side when I'd visit with them, and they took great interest in me. And They'd say, look, Papa knows you're scared, you're worried, you're frightened, but you need to know two things. Papa loves you. More importantly, God loves you. And God has a special and unique purpose for your life. No matter how bad it gets, no matter how dark things are or how frightened you become, don't you ever lose sight of the fact God is real, God is love, and God's going to take care of you. And, sir, if I hadn't had those gentlemen giving me that lesson from the time I could understand language until I was about 12 years old, if I were alive at all, I certainly wouldn't be speaking with you as I am today. I would likely be in some dark hole wondering what somebody who held jobs like I have had was going to come do to pull me out of the ditch. You ask how I became who I am? I hope that by the end of my days, I am half the man that my grandfathers were, and that is my greatest aspiration. So whatever virtue is there, I credit to the benevolence of God and God's intervention in my life through the two angels that he gave me by way of grandfathers.
Brian Hubbard, I first heard about Ibogaine from Marcus Luttrell, and I wanted to clarify during the break that he was okay me telling the story. And he did I believe, a single treatment, and he began evangelizing that this was what needed to be done for veterans. What is Ibogaine, and how does it work?
Ibogaine is an alkaloid. It is psychoactive that is derived from three West African plant sources. One is the Iboga root, which takes about 10 years to come into maturation. It is the cultural pearl of a West African civilization called the Bwidis. The Bwidis have used Iboga in their cultural and religious ceremonies for centuries. In the mid-60s, a gentleman by the name of Howard Lotzoff had a heroin addiction that had nearly taken his life, and he'd struggled with it for 9 years. He came into contact with Ibogaine that had been derived from that Iboga root, and he had an experience that lasted about 10 to 12 hours, which is how long Ibogaine lasts. And at the end of it, he no longer wished to have heroin, and he never went back. And that touched off 60 years of intensive, deep dive, observational field study and research to understand how this works. There are two other plant sources from which it comes. One is called the Wakanga africana. It grows quickly. It grows plentifully. It can grow in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. It is that environmentally suitable for this state uniquely. There's a third source, the name of which I can't recall, but what is known about Ibogaine as an individual alkaloid is that it has the unique ability, as previously mentioned, to resolve physiological substance dependence. It has recently been discovered that not only does it interrupt addiction, but it has profound regenerative effects on the brain itself. Our veterans, unfortunately, are ground zero for multiple systems failures within the United States government, federally, state, and local levels. We see this as demonstrated by the dramatic rise in veteran suicide, the dramatic rise in substance dependence among veteran populations that are treated with a panoply of pharmacology that at bottom essentially anesthetize the soul and slowly euthanize the body. And as veterans have become desperate for relief that American systems will not deliver, they have taken the Hail Mary pass of a trip to Mexico for an Ibogaine treatment, and as they have returned in what are now numbers in the thousands, and have advised that they have felt the best that they can ever recall feeling in their life, a cohort of 30 were studied by Stanford University. The results were released in the journal Nature Medicine on January 5th, 2024, and those results were dramatic. Number one, it has been discovered that Ibogaine essentially resolves traumatic brain injury, and what makes this so incredibly significant is there is nothing known within the medical universe that regenerates the tissue of the brain itself, not one thing, except for Ibogaine. Pre- and post-MRI images of the veteran brains revealed that a single administration of Ibogaine created a regeneration of the white matter that covered the surface of each of these veteran brains. White matter is the electrical highway across which all of our thoughts and impulses travel. Not only was white matter regenerated at scale, but the centers of the brain responsible for emotional regulation and executive functioning grew in size, and the average reversal of brain age among the cohort of 30 was 1.5 years, with the top 5 veterans seeing their brains reverse in age by 5 years. So what we now know is that not only is Ibogaine a profound addiction interrupter, but it has the capacity to regenerate brain tissue in ways that are just now beginning to be understood. And if we have the opportunity in Texas to pioneer Ibogaine's pharmaceutical development through the FDA's process as championed by House Bill author Cody Harris and Senate Bill author Tan Parker, we are going to pioneer breakthroughs related to the treatment of conditions that impact the brain for which we have no effective answers. And these include Parkinson's disease, Lyme disease, multiple sclerosis, and perhaps even Alzheimer's disease. We cannot develop this medication quickly enough and deploy it within the U.S. medical system fast enough to satisfy me or anyone else who is in need of its curative effects. So all eyes are now on Texas as we look for an opportunity to allocate $50 million to create a public-private partnership to get this across the line.
Brian Hubbard is executive director of the Ibogaine Foundation. To be clear, folks, we're not trying to legalize Ibogaine. We're not trying to get you to take it. I'm not making any medical claims. This is an attempt to fund and study a potentially life-saving drug, because that's what it turns out to be. Brian Hubbard, you've explained a little bit about this drug. Talk to us about how let's say this thing is legalized tomorrow. I know some folks who are investors in this, I've come to find out of late, and they're very excited about the opportunity. And I am all for people making money. That financial incentive makes money break loose and want to fund more and do more. But what does this look like in 5 years, ideally, in your mind?
Well, let's begin with the acknowledgement of a very specific financial reality. The U.S. healthcare system, as influenced by the pharmaceutical industry, is currently one which prioritizes the delivery of treatments of chronicity over treatments that can actually deliver curative results. And one of the necessities for public funding for Ibogaine trials within the FDA's framework is to medicalize this within the United States. Public money is necessary because Ibogaine lost its patent as an addiction treatment back in 1992. So there is no big pharma profit incentive to develop it because of the way in which it can resolve opioid and other substance dependencies. In 5 years, what we would hope to have is a fully medicalized Ibogaine treatment system where an individual who has, whether it's traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress, or substance dependency, can come into a clinically controlled medical setting, spend anywhere from a week to 10 days inpatient, and receive Ibogaine treatment. This is a very serious medication that does come with certain cardiac risks, and it's important that this be administered by medical professionals along with cardiac care nurses who are able to mitigate risk, and that risk is the prolongation of the time between the beats of the heart, which, if they become too long, can lead to cardiac arrest. Now, this particular risk can be mitigated with the co-administration of magnesium, and this is something that's been known for decades among folks who know what they're doing with this. When a person takes what are essentially pills, and that's how it's currently administered in the clinics in Mexico, you take a pill, and then you lay down once you begin to feel the effects, and the effects are usually accompanied by the sounds of clicking in your ears, and then you kind of feel a heaviness and you lay down. Because I don't believe in preaching what I ain't willing to practice, I underwent the treatment to understand how it works and what the effect is on the person. For about 10 to 12 hours, you are in a state of semi-paralysis. You are at all times oriented to person, place, and time. This is not dissociative. If I were to take Ibogaine right now in an hour, I could talk with you as coherently as I am now, though I likely could not walk. However, if I close my eyes, I will likely see visions from my life's history. And I will see them from a perspective that almost places me outside of what my life has been, so that I am able to process and understand those things that have happened to me from a vantage point that is new, and one that helps me understand how to reorient my relationship with myself and my relationship with the world. And it is through this introspective process that individuals come away with what I believe is Ibogaine's most potent quality, and that is its ability to affirm the reality of our human divinity as children of an eternal creator whose essence is almighty, unconditional love for each of us. Without an acknowledgement of the existence and primacy of the human soul, there is not any medical treatment that can be delivered through synthetic pharmacology that can get anyone who is experiencing despair anywhere close to where they need to be to become a restored human being. There is the opportunity to responsibly medicalize Ibogaine, which should never be the subject of legalization or decriminalization efforts, precisely because of the cardiac risk that accompanies it. It's a serious medication. It gives a person the very best new beginning that can be conferred upon them to rebuild a life that has been devastated by trauma and addiction, because at the heart of those conditions is profound spiritual affliction.
Brian, can you hold there for just a moment? I want to read something I read. It said the United States outlawed Ibogaine in 1967 alongside other psychedelics. Regulators later deemed it a Schedule I controlled substance with no accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse, in the same class as LSD and heroin. Now, I don't know enough about Ibogaine to know, but I know that LSD and heroin from my study are very different drugs, and that the people typically making these classifications are fearmongers. I don't think that marijuana should be criminalized. So let's start there, at least not for adults. And I don't want them smoking it in public, but that's a different subject. But why do you think it's categorized as this, and where do you think, I know you talked a little bit about, under what terms would you hopefully down the road, if it passes the studies and gets blessed, that it would be administered? I know you answered a little bit of that.
So let's begin with this classification as a Schedule I substance pursuant to the Controlled Substances Act. That was an explicitly reactionary, politically destructive decision that was made within this broad-based catchment of anything and everything that was deemed counterculture to the establishment of the time, in particular the Nixon administration and its broad-based war on drugs that was in many ways racially motivated. Our legal system is populated with what I would describe as a number of fictitious legal realities that are used to bind, torture, and kill the truth. And Ibogaine's classification as a drug or medication that has a high propensity for abuse with no therapeutic value is a prime example of one of these fictitious legal realities. For everything that has a recreational abusive use, there is a substantial street economy that barters it. We know where opium comes from. We know where cocaine comes from. We know where meth comes from. There are extensive black markets in the United States that distribute all of these substances through our society. Most folks have never heard about Ibogaine because there is no street economy for Ibogaine. There's no street economy for Ibogaine because it is not a drug of abuse. It is a highly unpleasant and challenging physical experience to receive this medication. Its function is explicitly anti-addictive, though unpleasant, and it does not in any way belong in Schedule I.
Brian Hubbard, our guest, discussing Ibogaine, coming up. A lot of people want to make decisions for other people. They want to deny them opportunities to do this or that. There are too many fat people. We need a law that you can't eat sugar. There's too much of this. We need to prevent people from doing it because I don't do it. They shouldn't do it. I received a number of emails during the break, one of which said, "Your conversation with the gentleman regarding Ibogaine is dangerous. I have 15 years of continuous sobriety. The only, all cap, way to get and stay sober long term is by working the 12 steps. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Using a drug to get sober is dangerous and doesn't work. However, by working the 12 steps and going to AA or NA, as well as working with others, will guarantee that you stay sober. I know a lot of people who've been to AA 20 times or more, and it didn't work for them. This isn't just an opinion, it is a fact. Yes, there's always a person who says, my way is the only way, and it's very important that you offer no alternative path to end up in that same place, even if on a map it appears to me. This is my path. This is the only path. I won't let you say there's another path. It's very important to me that you validate my opinion and my way, because this is the only way in the history of mankind that anything has ever succeeded. And I know that, even though I really don't even know what Ibogaine is, because I know these things because it worked for me. Yes. People are fascinating. People are fascinating. Brian Hubbard is the executive director of the Ibogaine Foundation. By the way, I'm not trying to get anybody to do Ibogaine. I'm scared to death to do it. This trip you take 10 to 12 hours, this does not sound like it's the faint of heart. My goodness alive. But I've also watched guys who struggled when they came back from war, blow their brains out. That trip they were going through was worse than what this thing's going to be. And why wouldn't we? We will give our men, our warriors, every ship, every gun, every explosive, every air cover, everything. We'll spend billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, to send them to war. And we can't look for ways to help them heal when they come home when we know they're hurting? That doesn't seem right, does it? Brian Hubbard, let's wrap up. How do folks learn more about this if they would like to learn more?
Well, I'll point them in a couple of directions. One is they can go to IbogaineTexas.com and learn all about the Texas Ibogaine Initiative and its goal of creating a first-of-its-kind public-private partnership whereby the state of Texas will lead this country in the development of Ibogaine's breakthrough therapeutic potential to address veteran suicide, veteran substance dependence, and other mental health conditions that are brought on by the trauma of war, recognizing that veterans are ground zero for the most difficult afflictions of the human condition, but certainly not the exclusive possessors of those conditions. By virtue of the veterans walking through the door, everyone else who shares in the burdens of both trauma and addiction will be able to receive, with a successful Texas project, the opportunity to choose this treatment should they so wish. And Mr. Berry, you said it beautifully. There is no one-size-fits-all in the game of life. Every person is a unique individual, and the pathway to recovery from trauma and addiction is as unique as the person who has experienced it. We are duty-bound to diversify, expand, and improve on therapeutic options within this society to people who suffer with any affliction. And the opportunity Texas has with Ibogaine is one to break down the door that has been erected by the big pharma conglomerates that monetize sustained human misery, to bring liberation to our sufferers in this life, whose next stop is the graveyard, but for the intervention effects that an Ibogaine treatment can bring. You may also go to rallytexas.org to express your support for Senate Bill 2308 and House Bill 3717 to your elected representatives here in Texas, whether they're your state representatives, your state senators, your governor, lieutenant governor. Rallytexas.org. Please go there and express your support for the passage of this critical legislation whose fate we will know by week's end.
I will quote my dear friend Marcus Luttrell, who went through the treatment, when he said, trying to abuse Ibogaine would be like abusing chemo medication. You don't want to do it. You know, people fear, they don't want anything to be legal because everybody's going to abuse it. The most abused drug in America, and has been for 100 years, is alcohol. It is so heavily abused that most people don't even realize that they themselves are, quote unquote, abusing it. They cannot imagine a life without it. They couldn't hold a party without it. They couldn't have the workers join after work without it. Some people wake up and can't get till noon without it. They can't have a lunch without it. They can't have a nice dinner without it. It is so heavily abused. It is such a major part of our economy, and it is so much a coping technique, which is an abuse at those levels. Kidney, liver deaths, heart deaths, the things that, but nobody's out there trying to bring back prohibition because we recognize. So people will say to me, Brian, they'll say, well, you're right about all that, but we can't make alcohol illegal yet, but we can keep all them others illegal. But you understand that making something illegal is not necessarily a benefit to society. Well, Brian, let me wrap up by saying I don't know the answer. I've not done the treatment, and it doesn't sound like I want to do it. Marcus is a dear friend of mine, and he's pretty protective, and he knows that my tolerance for such things is a whole lot less than his, and this challenged him. But I am interested in seeking out ways, whether that be plant-based, a psychedelic, or anything else that can help people, not just veterans, suffering from addiction and trauma. And, the early results of this are pretty good. So I look forward to hopefully some more good returns on it. Thank you for sharing your time with us, Brian Hubbard.
Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Berry. It's been an honor and a privilege to speak with you and your audience, and let's all hope and pray that we have a successful campaign here at the end of the week in Texas for Ibogaine.
Thank you, brother. It is before the House, and the House passed it 146-1. It goes before the Senate now, and I suspect the governor is going to sign it.
The Michael Berry Show.